Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The illusion of sanctuary shattered the instant silhouettes bled into the tree line circling the cabin. What began as a welcome reprieve, a simple caretaking task for Dr. Eris Thorne, curdled into a primal scramble for existence, a night etched into memory with the sharp edge of fear. My name is Ilara. I navigate the lean landscape of postgraduate studies. When Dr. Thorne offered her remote cabin for a week, a quiet haven for my thesis while she attended a conference, I grasped the opportunity. Solitude, whispering pines, uninterrupted focus. It was an academic's idyll. Those initial days unfolded in sun-dappled tranquility. The cabin itself, a sturdy structure wrapped in a porch that drank in panoramic forest vistas, felt like a cocoon. Time dissolved into pages turned, thesis notes drafted, and long meandering walks through emerald woods. Evenings found me nestled by the hearth's glow, the wind's low murmur through the branches and the sporadic call of an owl my only companions. Night 4 brought the rupture. I was preparing a simple meal, humming softly with the radio's tinny melody, when the lights were abruptly snuffed out. Darkness crashed down, thick and absolute, leaving only the faint impulsive embers in the fireplace. Initial annoyance gave way to pragmatism. Power failures weren't unheard of this far from civilization. Locating the heavy flashlight Dr. Thorne had pointed out, I moved towards the circuit breaker. A flicker of motion past the main room window arrested me. I froze, breath caught, eyes straining against the gloom. There, just beyond the cabin's small clearing, 3 shapes detached themselves from the deeper shadows, advancing with a chilling, deliberate purpose. My pulse leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. Visitors were anomalies out here, especially unannounced, and their low, furtive movement screamed wrongness, tripping every internal alarm. Instinctively, I killed the flashlight beam, sinking below the window line. Perhaps unseen, I was safe. Perhaps they sought an empty dwelling and would simply move on. But as I crouched, scarcely breathing, a sharp, metallic snick sliced through the night air. Wire cutters. The sound carried a dreadful finality. They were severing the phone line. Panic, cold and constricting, threatened to buckle my knees. Isolation became absolute. Miles from anyone, no landline, the dead zone swallowing any hope of a cell signal. Options flickered like faulty wiring. Flee? Into the black, unfamiliar woods? They likely held the advantage there. Hide? It seemed the only viable path, but where? A distinct creak from the porch floorboards galvanized me. Decision made. I snatched my backpack, stuffing in essentials, water, a few dense granola bars. Then I slipped down the narrow stairs into the root cellar Dr. Thorne had mentioned, a refuge against severe weather. The heavy, insulated door thudded shut behind me, just as the sickening sound of shattering glass echoed from above. They were inside. The cellar air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and preserved things. Shelves lined the cool walls, laden with jars and forgotten gardening tools. I wedged myself into the deepest corner, behind crates stiff with dust, fighting to quiet the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. Above, the cabin groaned under their search, the heavy thump of drawers yanked open, the jarring crash of objects overturned. What obsession drove them? "Everywhere," commanded a voice scraped raw like gravel. "Boss wants it. Said it has to be here." The girl. Another voice, younger, thinner. My heart seized. They knew. "Find her," the first voice snarled. She might have seen where the old woman stashed it. Stashed what? What possession of Dr. Thorne's could warrant such violence? The cellar door groaned open, slicing the darkness. Beams from powerful flashlights stabbed into the space, sweeping erratically. Light washed over my hiding place once, twice. I squeezed my eyes shut. A silent scream trapped in my throat, bracing for discovery. Then the door rasped closed. Footsteps retreated, unseen, for now. Time lost meaning in that subterranean dark. Every muscle screamed from tension, ears straining for the slightest sound from the violated house above. An eternity passed, measured in heartbeats. Then, gradually, the noises subsided. Silence descended, heavy and uncertain. Had they gone? I counted, a slow, deliberate 1,000 breaths before daring to uncoil my cramped limbs. Pins and needles ignited in my feet as I stood. Edging towards the cellar door, I listened. Nothing but the cabin's settling groans. Drawing a shaky breath, I eased the door open a fraction, peering out. Chaos reigned. Furniture lay brutalized, contents of drawers vomited across the floorboards. But the space seemed deserted. Cautiously, I emerged, scanning every shadow, every corner. Had they truly departed? Just as a fragile tendril of relief began to unfurl, the low growl of an engine vibrated through the floor. Headlights swept the windows, painting stark, moving shadows across the wreckage. A vehicle door slammed shut. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel outside, then approached the cabin. "Anything?" a new voice called, sharp with authority. "Place is tossed. Clean," came the reply from outside. "No document, no girl." Document. What document? "Keep looking," the newcomer commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Rip it down to the studs if you have to. And find that girl. She can't have gone far." Staying was impossible. Discovery was merely delayed. Escape. The back door beckoned, a few yards across the ruined living room. If I could reach it, melt into the woods. Keeping low below the window lines, I crawled, desperation lending speed. My hand reached for the doorknob. Beneath my weight, a floorboard emitted a piercing creak that echoed in the sudden, absolute stillness. Footsteps, fast, pounded towards me. Thought evaporated. I wrenched the door open and bolted. Shouts erupted behind me, unmistakable sounds of pursuit. I plunged headlong into the forest's embrace, a blind flight through grasping branches that tore at my clothes and skin. Directionless, propelled only by terror, I ran until my lungs burned like acid and my legs turned to water. Finally, unable to take another step, I collapsed behind the broad trunk of an ancient oak, gulping air in ragged gasps. As the adrenaline tide began to recede, I listened, straining against the forest's nocturnal symphony. Only the wind, the rustle of unseen creatures. Had I shaken them? Or were they casting a methodical net through the trees? Staying put felt like waiting for the inevitable. Help, authority, but where? Panic had scrambled my internal compass. The stark reality crashed down, lost, hunted, alone in the vast, indifferent wilderness. No communication, no aid, and stalked by men driven by unknown motives, seeking something I couldn't comprehend. A moment of pure despair washed over me, hot tears tracing paths through the grime on my cheeks. Then, a deeper instinct took hold. Breathe, think. Dr. Thorne had mentioned a ranger station, perhaps 5 miles east. I tilted my head back, searching the dense canopy for a glimpse of the sky. There, Ursa Major, the steadfast guide. I found Polaris, oriented myself. East. It was a fragile thread, but it was direction. It was hope. Summoning reserves I didn't know I possessed, I pushed myself upright and began to move. Stealth became paramount. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves sent jolts of fear through me. I glanced constantly over my shoulder, expecting shadows to detach and pursue. Hours bled together, marked only by the deepening ache in my blistered feet and protesting muscles. Each time exhaustion threatened to claim me, the image of those men, their harsh voices, propelled me onward. Then, just as my endurance frayed to its final strand, a faint, warm glow filtered through the trees. The ranger station. Relief surged, a potent wave carrying me forward. I stumbled from the tree line into the station's small parking area as the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the eastern sky. The ranger on duty, startled by my wild, scratched, dirt-streaked appearance, listened intently to my fractured story before reaching immediately for the phone, his voice calm and official as he summoned the police. The ensuing days blurred into a montage of official statements and probing questions. Dr. Thorne, it emerged, was entangled in exposing high-level corruption. The sought-after document held damning evidence against powerful figures. Most of the men from the cabin were apprehended, though their leader remained elusive. For weeks afterward, every unexpected shadow seemed to hold his silhouette, every sudden noise the prelude to his return. A year has passed since that night dissolved into nightmare. The city's constant thrum and artificial light now offer a strange sort of comfort. My thesis gathers dust, the research inextricably linked to the terror of that week. Yet, slowly, painstakingly, I'm stitching my life back together. Survival, I'm learning, isn't solely about escaping immediate peril. It's the quiet, daily act of confronting fear and choosing to move forward. I doubt the feeling of absolute safety will ever fully return, but I carry the knowledge of a resilience I never knew I possessed. If I could endure the forest, the flight, the fear, then surely I can navigate what comes next. So, should you ever find yourself embraced by wilderness, listening to the silence, and a discordant note sounds within you, trust it. Sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't the ones with claws, but those who walk upright, guarding their secrets in the shadows. A snapped branch echoed like bone breaking arresting our motion, still in the very air in the deep woods. Hours we'd walked, sunk in the green cathedral hush, but that single fracture altered the world. We drew close, 3 figures shrinking in the twilight bleed, ears straining against the pulse in our throats. Our pilgrimage into solitude was, in that instant, twisting into something else. A primal scramble against a threat far more cunning than claw or fang. My name is Leo. The wilderness has been my sanctuary since boyhood. This trek, plotted for months, was shared with Maya and Ben, souls tethered to mine by years of shared paths. We sought the untamed heart of the Appalachians, a pocket whispered to be untouched, remote. The allure was potent, raw earth, profound quiet. We were blind, utterly, to the darkness coiled within that beauty. Our camp materialized beside a chattering creek, a scene ripped from some forgotten landscape painting. 2 days dissolved in sun-dappled perfection, hikes that stretched the legs and soul, trout pulled gleaming from the water, firelight dancing on laughing faces as stories unspooled under the stars, a pocket paradise claimed for ourselves. The third dawn tempted us deeper, the forest clenched, trees crowding, undergrowth weaving thick tapestries. A thrill sparked, the fantasy of being first, of treading where none had in generations. Then, carried on the breeze, voices. Not the cheerful calls of fellow wanderers, but something jagged, discordant. Annoyance prickled first, our solitude breached. But drawn nearer, the tone curdled the air, harsh, angry. We sank behind the mossy girth of a fallen giant, peering through a screen of ferns. Bile rose in my throat. Below, in a small trampled clearing, stood men. 4, maybe 5, swathed in stained camouflage, cradling firearms with casual menace. A soiled map lay spread on an overturned crate. "The stash is here," one snarled, a grimy finger stabbing the paper. "Move it now. Feds are sniffing." Maya's fingers dug into my arm, her breath catching. We hadn't just stumbled off the path, we'd blundered into a viper's nest. Inch by agonizing inch, we began our retreat. But the forest floor, littered with nature's tripwires, betrayed us. Ben's boot snagged a root. He pitched back with a muffled curse, dead wood cracking sharp as a rifle shot. Heads snapped up. Eyes, hard and feral, raked the tree line. "Who's out there?" The shout ripped through the quiet. "Show yourselves." There was no thought, only flight. Instinct took over, adrenaline searing away hesitation. We plunged into the dense woods, branches lashing like whips, the ground uneven beneath our frantic feet. Behind us, guttural shouts, the heavy crashing of pursuit. "Split up," Ben gasped, his voice ragged. "Harder to track." Logic warred with the urge to stay together, a pack against the wolves. But he was right. A desperate, shared glance. Then we fractured, peeling away into the darkening maze. Downhill I ran, blind instinct driving me towards the memory of the stream. Water, a shroud for scent, a path erased. The world became a smear of green and brown, my own frantic heartbeat a drum against my ribs. Footfalls pounded behind me, gaining. Panic clawed, a cold dread threatening to paralyze, but I shoved it back. Focus, survive. I erupted from the tree line onto the stream's slick, stony bank, balance precarious. Without pausing, I plunged into the shock and cold, the gasp stolen from my lungs. Downstream, I scrambled, wading, slipping, trying for speed, for silence. How long? Minutes stretched into an eternity before I hauled myself, shivering violently, into a shallow alcove carved beneath an overhang of rock. I wedged myself into the deepest recess, fighting to quiet my rasping breath. Splashing. Close. Someone was methodically working the stream. I ceased breathing. A figure materialized, dark against the fading light, passing the mouth of my refuge, close enough to touch. One of the men, rifle held ready. He paused, head cocked, scanning the shadowed rocks near my hiding place. My heart seized. He knows. He heard. But then, with agonizing slowness, he moved on, his boots churning the water further downstream. I remained entombed in damp stone until cramps seized my muscles and the last vestiges of light surrendered to shadow. Only then did I uncurl, emerging into a forest transformed. The familiar nocturnal chorus, insects, rustling creatures, was eerily absent. Silence pressed in, heavy with menace. Maya, Ben. Where were they? Had they escaped the hunters? Doubt gnawed. Night fell absolute, turning the woods into a realm of phantoms. Every shadow writhed. Every nocturnal sigh of wind sounded like pursuit. I moved like a wraith, senses stretched taut, scanning the oppressive dark. Hope dwindled to a guttering ember. Then, faint, almost imagined, a whistle. 3 soft, rising notes. An old signal, devised years ago for just this terror. Separation in the wild. My heart leaped. Maya? Ben? Stealthily, I stalked the sound. It drew me towards a dense laurel thicket. As I neared, a hand emerged from the darkness, fingers beckoning. Maya, filthy, scratched, eyes hollowed with exhaustion, but blessedly, terrifyingly alive. We clung to each other, a silent, trembling reunion. Ben? I whispered, the word raw in my throat. She shook her head, tears finally spilling, tracking clean paths through the grime. I thought, with you. We huddled in the thicket through a night that refused to end, taking turns at watch, starting at every snap of twig, every rustle of leaf. Dawn arrived not as relief, but as a grim necessity. Move, find Ben, escape. But the hunters remained, unseen, unheard, a palpable presence in the woods that were no longer sanctuary, but cage. We crept forward, searching, hiding, the vibrant greens and browns now tinged with dread. Mid-morning. A single gunshot cracked, the sound brutally sharp, echoing, sending unseen birds exploding from the canopy. Maya and I locked eyes, the same sickening certainty reflected. Ben. Caution warred with desperation as we moved towards the sound. Cresting a low rise, we saw them. The clearing. The men, clustered. And Ben, on his knees, head bowed, hands bound. My stomach plummeted. His face was a mask of bruises and blood. The leader stood over him, pistol glinting. Last time, the man's voice was a low growl. Where are the others? Ben spat crimson onto the dirt. Go to hell. The gun lifted. Time ran out. Without conscious thought, I seized a loose rock, hefting its weight, and hurled it with all my strength into the trees flanking the clearing's far side. Heads turned towards the sudden noise. In that instant, Maya and I broke cover. I slammed into the leader, a tangle of limbs and fury, his pistol skittering away. Maya sprinted for Ben. Chaos erupted. I fought with a ferocity born of sheer terror, fueled by the image of my friends. Maya sawed at Ben's bindings with frantic hands. He staggered upright, injured but adding his weight to the fray. It was a blur of flailing fists, desperate shoves, grunts of pain. Somehow, amidst the pandemonium, we tore free. We ran. Faster than I thought possible, feet pounding, lungs screaming, the forest floor a treacherous blur. Shouts and sporadic gunfire pursued us, but we didn't look back. Didn't dare stop until our legs buckled and our chests burned. And then, impossibly, we stumbled onto the scarred shoulder of a road. Tarmac. Civilization. The sight, mundane and miraculous, brought tears stinging to my eyes. We waved down the first approaching vehicle, a pair of wide-eyed seniors in a sedan. We must have looked like creatures escaped from some primal nightmare. Torn, bloodied, wild-eyed. Our fragmented, desperate pleas somehow cut through their alarm. They drove us, huddled in the back seat, to the nearest town, straight to the indifferent sanctuary of the police station. The story spilled out. The armed men, the overheard plans, the chase, the capture, the escape. They listened, skepticism slowly yielding to gravity, calls escalating to state troopers, then federal agents. Days later, recovering in the sterile quiet of a hospital room, the full picture emerged. A homegrown terror cell dug in deep. Our accidental intrusion had unraveled their operation. We were lauded, reporters calling us heroes. It felt hollow. We were simply survivors. 3 friends whose search for untamed beauty led them to the ugliest corners of human darkness. That trip carved something deep within us. We stared into the abyss together, felt the icy breath of mortality. But in that crucible, we also forged something unbreakable. A resilience, a bond tested by fire. I still seek solace in the wild places, still feel the pull of the deep woods. But the memory lingers, a constant counterpoint to the beauty. The forest keeps its secrets, and sometimes the most lethal predators are not the ones with claws and fangs, but those who walk upright, carrying darkness within them. Silence swallowed the city first, then the light. One moment, the familiar urban glow hummed beyond Alara's window. The next, absolute blackness pressed in, thick and sudden. Not just her cramped apartment, but the entire metropolis snuffed out like a candle. As her fingers scrabbled in the bedside abyss for a torch, a different sound intruded. A skittering malice at the doorframe, the unmistakable signature of metal worrying metal. Instantly, the vast, powerless city vanished, her universe contracting violently to the scant feet separating her from the entrance. The blackout, she grasped with chilling certainty, was merely the overture. Paralysis seized her, hand hovering uselessly within the drawer. The scraping at the lock persisted, escalating, each metallic rasp tightening the knot of fear in her chest. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs she felt sure must be audible through the wood. At last, cool, cylindrical metal met her searching fingertips. She drew the torch close, a cold talisman against the encroaching dread, but kept the switch untouched. A sudden spear of light would be a beacon, betraying her position. Her mind raced, a frantic cartographer seeking escape routes on a map suddenly rendered featureless. This apartment, her supposed sanctuary, was little more than a shoebox suspended 6 floors above the asphalt river of the street. A bed, a sliver of kitchen, a minuscule bath, hiding places were laughable illusions, escape routes non-existent save for the single window overlooking a sheer, fatal drop. She was caged. The scraping ceased. A soft, almost delicate click echoed in the profound quiet, a tiny, fatal sound that sent splinters of ice through her veins. They were inside. Hinges groaned a reluctant protest as the door swung inward. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, treading onto her floorboards. Alara held her breath, melting herself into the wall beside the bed, willing the oppressive darkness to be an impenetrable shroud. "I know you're here." A voice breathed into the space, low and serrated, distinctly male, utterly unknown. "Come on out. Makes it easier for everyone." She remained utterly still, a statue carved from terror. Perhaps silence would convince him the space was empty. Perhaps he would retreat, but the footsteps resumed their exploration, punctuated by the sounds of drawers being pulled open, possessions rifled through. Each noise was magnified, distorted in the blackness, her senses straining, mapping his unseen movements. Passivity was a death sentence. She had to act. Inch by agonizing inch, she began to slide along the wall, navigating by memory towards the kitchenette. Steel, sharp and gleaming even in the mind's eye, was her objective. Her foot snagged, a carelessly discarded shoe, perhaps, and she pitched forward with a muffled stumble. The sound, though negligible in daylight, reverberated like a dropped stone in the stillness. The intruder's movements instantly ceased. "Ah," he murmured, the sound much closer now, terrifyingly close. "There you are." Panic detonated within her. Stealth abandoned, she scrambled, hands flung out like divining rods into the void, towards the kitchen counter. She heard him coming, his pace quickening, purposeful. Her hip connected brutally with the counter's edge, sending a sickening jolt through her frame. But she didn't falter. Fingers swept frantically across the surface, scattering unseen objects in her desperate search. Finally, they closed around the familiar haft of a chef's knife. Whirling, she raised it defensively, simultaneously thumbing the switch on the torch. A sudden, stark slash of light bisected the darkness, pinning a face destined to populate her nightmares. Tall, shrouded in shadow below a tangle of beard, his eyes gleamed back, feral and reflective. A heavy crowbar was clutched in his fist. "Stay back," Ilara managed, her voice a thin tremor despite her resolve. "Police. I called them. They're coming." He laughed, a dry rasp that scraped against her nerves. "No, you didn't, sweetheart. Lines are dead. Just us." He advanced a step. She retreated, her back finding the cold solidity of the counter. The knife trembled in her grasp. The torch beam danced, painting erratic shapes on the walls. "What do you want?" she demanded, the question a fragile bid for time, for comprehension in this waking horror. "Same as anyone," he replied, gesturing vaguely with the crowbar. "Cash. Anything worth taking. Maybe a little company on a long, dark night like this." The insinuation coiled in her stomach like a serpent. Her grip on the knife tightened. Its use was no longer hypothetical. He must have registered the shift, the hardening in her posture, because his own expression lost its predatory amusement, settling into something colder. "Don't be stupid," he warned. "Give me what I want. I leave. Nobody gets hurt." A liar's promise. Capitulation felt like a surrender, not just of possessions, but of survival itself. She had to fight. With a strangled cry, she lunged, the knife describing a desperate arc through the intervening dark. He recoiled sharply, the blade slicing empty air. The torch beam wobbled, plunging them momentarily back into disorienting blackness. A snarl ripped from his throat, raw anger replacing the veneer of control. The crowbar whistled past her ear as she ducked instinctively, feeling the rush of displaced air, hearing the sickening crack as it connected with the cabinet behind her. She scrambled sideways, desperate for distance, but the darkness confused her bearings. Her foot caught, perhaps on a fallen chair, and she sprawled onto the floorboards. The knife spun from her grasp, a metallic skitter into oblivion. Pain flared in her knee from the impact, sharp and immediate, but there was no time for it. She heard him advancing, his breathing heavy, ragged with exertion and fury. Crawling blindly, her hands swept the floor, searching for any substitute weapon. They closed on something solid, rectangular, a thick hardback book. Scant defense, but her only option. As his presence loomed over her, she coiled, waiting. Sensing him directly above, she swung the book upwards with every ounce of strength she possessed. It met flesh and bone with a satisfyingly dense thud. A grunt of pain answered her. Seizing the fleeting advantage, she scrambled upright and ran. But where? The front door gaped open, offering passage to an equally black hallway where he could easily overtake her. The bathroom. A lock, perhaps a window, however small. She slammed the bathroom door shut, her fingers fumbling frantically with the lock mechanism in the pitch dark. Just as the bolt slid home with a decisive click, a heavy weight slammed against the other side. "Open this door!" Silas roared, his voice muffled but potent, punctuated by heavy blows against the wood. "Open it now, or I swear I'll kick it down." Alara backed away, eyes darting wildly around the confined space, seeking egress. The window above the toilet was minuscule, a postage stamp of possibility, but it was the only one. As the assault on the door intensified, the wood groaning under the impacts, she clambered onto the toilet lid, reaching for the window latch. Stiff from disuse, it resisted her trembling fingers. A loud crack echoed as the door frame began to splinter. She pulled harder, desperation lending strength, and finally the latch yielded. The window swung open, admitting a rush of cool night air and the distant cacophony of a city in chaos, blaring alarms, indistinct shouts from the street below. With a final, splintering crash, the bathroom door gave way. No time for thought, no backward glance. She propelled herself towards the opening, ignoring the scrape of the frame against her skin. For one heart-stopping moment, she hung suspended, half in, half out. Then rough hands clamped onto her ankles, attempting to drag her back into the suffocating darkness. With a final, convulsive heave, she pushed free, tumbling outwards. Her stomach plummeted, bracing for the long fall, the inevitable end. Instead of the anticipated void, she landed with jarring force onto the rusted metal grid of a fire escape she hadn't known existed. The impact stole her breath, but the sound of Silas cursing as he struggled with the narrow window spurred her on. Ignoring the symphony of pain radiating through her body, she forced herself upright. The fire escape groaned and swayed precariously beneath her weight as she descended, hand over hand, into the deeper shadows, moving as fast as the treacherous footing allowed. When her feet finally struck the blessed solidity of the alley pavement, she ran. Ran with burning lungs and pumping legs, fueled by primal terror. Ran until the sounds of pursuit dwindled, until the alley opened onto a wider square where the flashing lights of emergency vehicles pulsed against the gloom. Later, wrapped in the crinkling foil of a shock blanket, a paramedic tending to her scrapes and bruises, the adrenaline began its slow retreat. The full weight of the ordeal crashed down, setting her body to trembling uncontrollably. But beneath the tremors, a new awareness solidified. She was alive. She had stared into the abyss of her deepest fears and somehow, impossibly, emerged. As the first hesitant brushstrokes of dawn began to paint the bruised eastern sky, casting a tentative light over the powerless city, Alara knew. Whatever challenges the future held, she would meet them. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. A solitary crimson bead, stark against the polished bone-white tile, shattered the night's predictable rhythm. That single, glistening drop was the overture. I knew then this shift, cocooned within the hollow shell of the Riverbend Galleria, would diverge sharply from the quiet solitude I usually curated. What commenced as the familiar ritual of erasing the day's smudges from an empty cathedral of commerce devolved, breathlessly fast, into a primal dance with death itself, a predator still stalking these echoing halls. My name is Elias. For 3 years, the Galleria's graveyard shift has been my domain. Usually, it's a tranquil pocket of time. Just me, the rhythmic slosh of my mop water, the infrequent echoing footsteps of Marcus, the security man making his circuit. But that Tuesday, typically the nadir of the week's foot traffic, warped the definition of normalcy. I'd clocked in at 10, the last cinema patrons dissolving into the night outside. The mall after hours possesses a unique persona, a slumbering leviathan, its vastness amplifying every sound. My own steps became percussion in the empty concourses, accompanied by the low thrum of ventilation and the intermittent nervous tick of a fluorescent tube. It was an ambiance both serene and unsettling. I was navigating the food court, the scent of stale popcorn and disinfectant mingling in the air, meticulously wiping down surfaces when it caught my eye. Near the shuttered facade of Burger Bliss, a minuscule shadow marred the floor's sheen. Spilled soda, perhaps? A common enough stain. Yet, drawing closer, a cold knot tightened in my gut. Not soda. Blood. Unmistakably. My initial thought, a minor accident, a shopper nicking a finger, oblivious. Such things occurred. But as my gaze traced the subsequent droplets, a visceral chill spider-webbed across my skin. They formed a deliberate path, leading away from the open court, snaking towards the utilitarian service corridors. Prudence screamed, "Call Marcus, report it, let procedure take its course." But a deeper, more primal curiosity, honed by years spent intimately familiar with every hidden corner and shadowed alcove of this place, urged me forward. If someone was injured, perhaps I could offer aid. The trail terminated at a heavy door stenciled "Personnel Only." It hung slightly ajar, a stark anomaly. These portals were invariably secured after closing. A tremor passed through my hand as I nudged it wider, its hinges groaning a protest into the profound silence. The service corridor beyond was a study in chiaroscuro, illuminated only by the spectral green wash of emergency exit signs. Here, the crimson trail intensified, smeared streaks painting the cinder block wall, stark evidence of someone faltering, leaning heavily for support. "Hello?" My voice, thin and reedy, bounced back at me from the narrow confines. "Is anyone hurt? Can I help?" Silence answered, save for the distant metronomic drip of water from some unseen plumbing ailment. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I pressed on, drawn by the grim thread. It led to yet another door, this one granting access to the subterranean storage depths. As my fingers brushed the cold metal handle, a sound reached me, a muffled thump from within, swiftly followed by something akin to a strangled sob. Adrenaline detonated within me. Someone was undeniably inside, trapped in distress. I wrenched the door open, poised to intervene. The scene that confronted me froze the marrow in my bones. Dimly lit by a single naked bulb swaying almost imperceptibly, the storage room was a labyrinth of stacked cartons and spectral, plastic-shrouded mannequins. And there, occupying the bleak center stage, was a tableau sculpted from shadow and dread. A figure stood, back towards me, hunched over a shape sprawled upon the concrete floor. As my vision pierced the gloom, horror clarified the image. The shape was human, terrifyingly still. The creak of the opening door must have registered, for the figure abruptly straightened and pivoted. A knife, its blade slick and dark, was clutched in his hand. Our gazes locked across the intervening space, and reality fractured. I saw the feral glint in his eyes, the spatter of gore across his features. He saw me, an interloper, a witness. Thought evaporated. Instinct screamed. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot, and bolted. My work boots pounded a desperate tattoo on the linoleum. Behind me, the storage room door crashed open again, the heavy footfalls of pursuit joining the frantic symphony of my escape. My mind, a chaotic whirlwind, struggled for a plan. Marcus. Security. The office was clear across the Galleria's expanse. Could I possibly reach it? Bursting from the service passage back into the grand concourse, my eyes scanned wildly, seeking any potential equalizer, any makeshift shield. The darkened storefronts, sealed behind metal grates, offered no sanctuary. The food court, a cluttered maze of tables and chairs, might impede him, but it would surely hinder me as well. I risked a glance over my shoulder, instantly regretting it. He was there, perhaps 50 feet back, closing the distance, his face a mask of murderous intent. The knife was gone, replaced by a fire axe, likely pilfered from an emergency cabinet recessed in the wall. Terror lent my limbs an unnatural velocity. I flew past the silent sentinels of retail, lungs burning, muscles screaming protest. The security office beckoned, just beyond the ornate fountain dominating the central plaza. Almost there. Then my foot found a treacherous slick patch on the tile, residue from my earlier cleaning overlooked. I went down hard, skidding, pain exploding in my knee. Adrenaline, a merciless taskmaster, hauled me upright. Limping, ragged, I surged onward. The security office door. Locked. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? I hammered on the unyielding surface, shouting Marcus's name, a useless plea swallowed by the mall's immensity. Marcus would be somewhere on his rounds, oblivious. How long until his return? Defeated, I turned, pressing my back against the door, facing the approaching menace. He had slowed his pace to a deliberate stalk, a grotesque parody of a smile twisting his lips. He knew. He had me trapped. "Please," I rasped, hands raised in a futile gesture of supplication. "You don't need to do this." His laughter, a hollow, chilling sound, reverberated through the cavernous space. "Ah, but I rather think I do," he countered, his tone unnervingly conversational. "Loose ends, you understand. Can't abide them." He hefted the axe, its polished head catching the ambient light. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for oblivion. The impact never landed. Instead, a sharp crack, like bone breaking, split the air, followed by a guttural grunt. My eyes snapped open. The killer was collapsing, a marionette whose strings had been severed, the axe clattering harmlessly away. Behind him stood Marcus, the night guard, his heavy-duty flashlight wielded like a truncheon, his face pale with shock. "Elias!" he exclaimed, his voice tight. "What in God's name is happening?" The hours that followed dissolved into a bewildering montage of flashing lights, crackling radios, and uniformed figures swarming the Galleria. Yellow tape delineated forbidden zones. Hushed questions were asked. Statements meticulously recorded. The man with the axe, it transpired, was a phantom sought across 3 states, leaving a trail of violence in his wake. The person in the storage room, a young woman, miraculously clung to life and was expedited to the hospital. As I sat, cocooned in a foil shock blanket in the back of an ambulance, an uncontrollable tremor racked my body. The stark reality of my near demise began to seep in, cold and undeniable. If Marcus hadn't deviated from his route, hadn't returned precisely when he did. In the ensuing days and weeks, whispers painted me a hero. Had I not investigated that initial drop of blood, they reasoned, the killer might have vanished, the woman's life forfeit. Yet heroism felt alien. What I felt was the stark imprint of luck, the deep chill of terror, and the certainty of being irrevocably altered. I tendered my resignation shortly thereafter. The thought of walking those corridors again, breathing that air thick with memory, was unbearable. The nightmares were potent enough without nightly immersion in their source. Now, years removed, the facade of normalcy surrounding places like the Galleria remains fractured for me. Every shadowed doorway whispers of potential threats. Every unexpected echo in a quiet space sends my pulse leaping. Logically, I comprehend the statistical improbability of that night's horror repeating. But logic offers scant comfort when you've looked into the abyss reflected in a killer's eyes. Sometimes, late at night, when the house settles into profound quiet, my thoughts drift back to him, to the chilling vacancy I witnessed, the terrifying nonchalance with which he prepared to extinguish my existence. And I'm left to ponder how many other such shadows walk among us, veiled in the mundane, awaiting their cue. I possess no definitive answers, only this hard-won certainty. The veneer of safety we construct is fragile. Danger festers in the unlikeliest corners, and the razor-thin margin between survival and oblivion can hinge on something as arbitrary as a locked door, a timely intervention, or a treacherous patch of polished floor. So, the next time solitude finds you in a quiet place, and a sound disrupts the stillness, or a detail seems dissonant, attend to it. It might signify nothing, or it could be the first tremor of an encroaching nightmare. In those moments, heed the whispers of your instincts. They may prove your most vital allies. The building possessed a voice, one composed of sighs and groans that echoed through its aged bones. In my newfound solitude within its walls, these nocturnal pronouncements seemed amplified, a skeletal symphony played just for me, Eliza. Nights in the apartment were draped in a quiet so profound it pressed against the eardrums, making the structure's creaks and settlings less like mundane occurrences. The shift of pipes, the whine of wind through unseen fissures, and more like conscious articulations. I'd rationalize them as the price of adjustment, the expected chorus accompanying the charm of this historic quarter and the almost suspicious affordability of the rent. Barely a week had passed since I'd unpacked my life into this space, seduced by the vestige of elegance clinging to the four-story edifice. My apartment, perched on the uppermost floor, was modest, a single bedroom overlooking the street, yet it boasted cavernous ceilings and the tall, watchful eyes of oversized windows. Beneath my feet, the hardwood floors, worn smooth by decades, sighed with every step, adding their own measure to the building's ongoing monologue. This particular evening dissolved slowly, bled away by the flickering light of the television as I sought refuge from a day's accumulated weariness. Eventually, the screen went dark. The ritual of teeth brushing was observed, and the embrace of bed was sought. It must have been past 1 when exhaustion finally claimed me, pulling me down into the welcoming depths beneath the covers. I surrendered to the quiet, letting the apartment's stillness be my lullaby. Then, a whisper of sound intruded, so faint at first I might have woven it from the fabric of a nascent dream, a delicate cadence like footfalls originating from directly overhead. But that was impossible. Mine was the highest floor. Above me lay only roof tiles and sky. The building's settling, I told myself, clinging to reason. Old structures breathe, they shift. Yet the sound persisted, refusing dismissal. It wasn't the random creak of warped timber, but a measured tread, slow, deliberate, traversing the unseen space above, heel to toe, heel to toe. My pulse quickened, a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. Eyes wide in the darkness, I stared upward at the flat expanse of the ceiling. This was no dream. The sound possessed an undeniable reality. Someone, or something, paced the void above my head. Throwing back the covers, I sat bolt upright, mind scrambling for purchase on the impossible geography of the situation. No attic existed, not according to the lease, not according to logic. Still, the footsteps echoed, distinct and rhythmic as if mapping the dimensions of a room that shouldn't be there, each step landing with calculated weight upon phantom floorboards. Propelled by a burgeoning dread, I slipped from the bed, the floorboards groaning their protest beneath my bare feet. My rational mind desperately cast about for explanations. A forgotten service hatch? Some nocturnal creature trapped between the joists? But listening to that heavy, unhurried pacing, each suggestion felt flimsy, inadequate. My phone, clutched like a talisman, cast a trembling cone of light as I edged into the hallway. The beam sliced through the oppressive shadows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. Above, the footsteps continued their steady, relentless patrol. I stood frozen, a statue carved from fear, wanting to act, to investigate, yet rooted by a profound reluctance to confront the source of the sound. My legs were twin pillars of lead. And then, as suddenly as it began, the pacing ceased. An abrupt cessation, leaving a silence more jarring than the noise itself. I held my breath, straining my ears against the sudden void, waiting for the next beat, the next sign. Nothing. The apartment returned to its profound quiet, as if the phantom walker had merely dissolved into the ether. Perhaps I was overreacting, I reasoned, forcing calm into my ragged breathing. Fatigue and imagination were potent conspirators. Shaken, I retreated to the perceived safety of my bed, though sleep remained elusive, hovering just beyond the reach of my strained nerves. The following day's routines almost succeeded in banishing the night's peculiarity. Work offered its familiar distractions, but returning home that evening, the threshold felt different. A subtle wrongness permeated the air, manifesting first as an odor, faint yet cloying and stale, the scent of decay long undisturbed. My immediate thought was forgotten rubbish, but the kitchen yielded no culprit. The miasma seemed to emanate not from any earthly source within the room, but to descend inexplicably from the ceiling itself. As dusk bled into night, the memory of the footsteps resurfaced, insistent. My gaze kept drifting upward, anticipating the return of that measured tread. The hours passed uneventfully, however, and by the time I surrendered to bed, a fragile conviction had formed. It had all been a trick of the mind, an overtired fantasy. Then, closer to 2, the sound returned. The same slow, heavy footsteps, pacing directly above. But this time they were louder, bolder, imbued with an undeniable insistence, as if their purpose was not merely to walk, but to be heard. A chill traced its way up my spine. My hand instinctively sought the cold comfort of my phone, my mind racing through futile options. The landlord? What could I articulate? There are footsteps in my ceiling. The absurdity echoed even in my panicked thoughts. The police? For what? Creaking floorboards, potentially. Before indecision could fully paralyze me, the footsteps halted once more, precisely above my bed. A dense silence fell, pregnant with anticipation. Then came a sound far worse, a singular, resonant thud. Heavy, final, as if something substantial had been dropped carelessly onto the floor overhead. It was followed almost immediately by a scraping, dragging noise, visceral, protracted, the sound of dead weight being laboriously pulled across floorboards. My heart hammered against my ribs. My breath came in shallow, panicked gasps. A desperate urge to flee warred with an equally potent fear of moving, of drawing attention from whatever resided just meters above my head. I lay rigid, trapped in a paralysis of terror, listening as the awful dragging sound seemed to stretch into an eternity before finally, gradually fading into silence. Sleep was unthinkable. I remained awake, eyes fixed on the blank plaster ceiling, waiting. Morning brought a fragile courage. I called the landlord, my voice tighter than I intended, relaying the noises, pressing him about any possible access point or hidden space above my unit. He sounded perplexed, offering perfunctory reassurance that nothing existed above the top floor. No attic, no crawl space. Probably just the pipe settling deer, he'd offered, his tone lacking any genuine belief. He promised, vaguely, to have someone look into it, but the dismissal hung heavy in the air. He didn't believe me. Days unfurled into a week, marked by an unnerving quiet from above. The footsteps remained absent. Yet, the feeling of being observed, a prickling awareness on the nape of my neck, never entirely dissipated, and the musty, sepulchral odor persisted, a constant, faint reminder of something unseen, perhaps festering just beyond the plaster. Then, late one night, lying in the tense darkness, striving for sleep, a new sound emerged. Not footsteps this time, a faint, intermittent tapping, like fingernails drumming lightly against drywall, originating from the ceiling. It grew steadily, rhythmically, from a tentative inquiry to an insistent, almost frantic summons that vibrated through the stillness. Scrambling out of bed, phone in hand, I aimed the flashlight beam upwards. My breath hitched. There, directly above where the tapping seemed most concentrated, a thin, dark line marred the white plaster. A crack. It hadn't been there before. Of that, I was certain. Even as I watched, mesmerized by horror, the tapping continued its urgent rhythm, and the fissure perceptibly widened, lengthening like a tiny, jagged wound inflicted from the other side. I stumbled backward, heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my sternum. The tapping abruptly stopped, but the crack remained, stark against the ceiling, a silent, ominous invitation. I didn't wait to see what might emerge. Keys were snatched, the door flung open, the apartment's lights left blazing in my precipitous flight. I drove, directionless at first, finally seeking refuge at a friend's house, arriving on her doorstep near dawn, too fragmented and incoherent to immediately explain the terror that had propelled me into the night. The following day, rationality partially restored, I called the landlord again. I spoke of the crack, my voice firm, insisting he dispatch someone immediately. Hours later, his call came. The maintenance worker had visited. He confirmed, with unsettling finality, what the landlord had initially stated. There was no attic, no crawl space, no accessible area whatsoever above my apartment. Just rafters, insulation, and the roof. An unexplained void. I never returned. Whatever presence resided in the airspace above that ceiling, pacing and tapping and leaving its physical mark, I had no desire to confront it further. The lease was broken, my belongings retrieved with hired help during the unambiguous safety of daylight. Some thresholds, I now understand, are best left uncrossed. Some mysteries better left unsolved. Some places simply breathe an air too old, too burdened, and are best left utterly alone. The skeletal husk of Gallows Mill clawed at the bruised twilight, its jagged silhouette stark against the fading sky. Vacant sockets of shattered panes seemed to watch our huddled congregation below. A tremor, cold and sharp, traced the length of my spine. Less from the encroaching night chill, more an echo of the structure's own palpable decay, a resonance of deep-seated warning. We laughed then, a brittle sound swallowed by the vastness, daring fates we couldn't comprehend, oblivious that this derelict monument to industry would soon become our oubliette, perhaps our final resting place. "Adventure awaits, people," Leo proclaimed, his grin a flash of bravado in the gloom. He was ever the catalyst, our designated pioneer into folly. Quick tour, some atmospheric shots for the feed, then we're gone. Seriously, what's the harm? How fiercely I wish I'd heeded the frantic pulse in my own throat, the silent scream urging retreat. But the undertow of belonging, the potent fear of being branded faint-hearted, proved stronger. Thus, armed with trembling beams of light and hearts that thrummed a discordant rhythm of thrill and dread, we surrendered ourselves to the waiting dark. To step inside Gallows Mill was to cross into a forgotten epoch. Moonlight, strained through the grimy, broken glass, spilled onto the factory floor, sculpting phantom shapes from rust-eaten behemoths of machinery and carpets of debris. The air hung thick, heavy with the ghosts of dust and the cloying perfume of rot. Our hesitant footfalls sent echoes scattering into the cavernous space, multiplying our presence, suggesting unseen company. "This place, it feels wrong," Maya whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the silence. A silent affirmation was all I could manage, my gaze sweeping the periphery, chasing shadows that danced just beyond the reach of our lights. We pressed inward, deeper into the belly of the building, our torch beams carving transient paths through the oppressive black. Leo, invigorated, gestured towards skeletal mechanisms, offering speculative histories for their forgotten functions. Despite the unease coiling in my gut, a certain desolate grandeur emanated from the ruins. Then came the sound, a jarring crash from the unseen levels above, followed by the distinct heavy tread of footsteps. A collective paralysis seized us. Our lights jerked upwards, painting frantic circles on the decaying ceiling. "What in God's name was that?" hissed Finn, his usual swagger dissolving into raw apprehension. "Relax," Leo attempted, though the tremor in his own voice betrayed him. "Old structure, settling, loose junk falling." But the denial crumbled as the footsteps resumed, deliberate and closer this time, pacing the floor directly overhead. "Out," I breathed, the word barely audible. "We need to get out, now." Spinning around, our bravado utterly extinguished, we retraced our steps towards the entrance. But where freedom should have been, a sight froze the marrow in my bones. The heavy door through which we'd entered was now shut fast, secured by a thick, rusted chain looped brutally around its handles from the outside. "No," Maya murmured, yanking futilely at the unyielding metal. "No, this isn't. It can't be." Leo swept his light across the surrounding walls, desperation etching lines onto his face. "Another exit. There has to be. Keep moving. Find it." With no alternative, we plunged deeper still, propelled by burgeoning panic. Every shadow now writhed with potential menace. Each groan of the ancient structure sent jolts of adrenaline through us. The footsteps above had ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight, punctuated only by our ragged breaths and the sporadic creaks of the dying building. Rounding a rusted pillar, Finn's light snagged on something that made us recoil in unison. Scrawled across the grimy brickwork, in streaks of something horrifyingly dark and viscous, were 3 words: "Welcome to your nightmare." "Right, this stops being amusing, now," Chloe cried, her voice pitching high with terror. "Who's doing this? Some kind of twisted prank?" Yet, the chilling certainty in the air refuted any notion of a joke. Fear was a tangible presence now, a suffocating entity drawing closer. We pushed onward, a frantic, stumbling search for escape, but the factory seemed to warp around us, a labyrinth of identical decaying machines and crumbling partitions. And, threaded through it all, the unsettling noises persisted. Faint scratching from within the walls, intermittent thuds from distant corners, and, most unnerving of all, whispers. Insidious susurrations that coiled just at the edge of hearing. "You heard that, didn't you?" Maya asked, her eyes wide pools of terror in the gloom. We nodded mutely, fear stealing our voices. The whispers seemed to swell, coalescing, though the words remained maddeningly indistinct, a sibilant chorus emanating from everywhere at once. Abruptly, Leo's torch beam sputtered, flickered, and died. Then Finn's. One after another, our lights winked out, plunging us into a disorienting, near absolute blackness. Only slivers of pallid moonlight offered any illumination, bathing the vast space in an ethereal, spectral blue. And in that spectral light, we saw them. Dozens of gleaming pinpoints like animal eyes, materializing in the darkness that encircled us. They were closing in. Instinct took over. Pure, unadulterated terror lent wings to our feet. We fled, crashing blindly through the darkness, stumbling over unseen obstacles, caromming off cold metal, driven only by the primal urge to escape. The eyes pursued, relentless, accompanied now by the shuffling, scraping sound of myriad feet gaining on us. We burst into a vast, open expanse, likely the main production floor. Across the echoing void, a glimmer of hope. A door, slightly ajar, revealing a tantalizing sliver of the night beyond. "There!" I yelled, voice raw. "Run!" Hope surged, fueling a final, desperate sprint. We pounded across the debris-strewn floor towards salvation. But mere feet away, the door slammed shut with the force of a thunderclap, the sound reverberating through the immense space. We hammered against the unyielding wood, screaming, pleading, but it was solid, immovable. All the while, the sounds of pursuit drew inexorably nearer. "What do we do?" Chloe sobbed, collapsing against the door in despair. My eyes darted wildly, scanning the immediate area for anything, any advantage. Then I saw it. A small ventilation grill, high on the wall near the ceiling. "Up there," I pointed, adrenaline surging anew. "The vent. If we can reach it, maybe." Leo cupped his hands, giving me a boost. Straining, I managed to wrench the rusted grill free. The opening was agonizingly small, a tight squeeze even for the slimmest among us, but it represented our sole chance. "Maya, you first," I urged, pushing her towards the opening. "Chloe next. We're right behind you." By agonizing one, we hauled each other up and into the suffocating confines of the vent shaft. As Leo, the last, scrambled desperately inside, I heard the heavy sounds of our pursuers entering the room below. We crawled onward through the cramped, dust-choked passage, muscles screaming, breath tearing at our lungs, moving as swiftly and silently as terror allowed. The ductwork twisted tortuously, and with every turn, I prayed it led outwards towards safety. After an eternity compressed into minutes, a faint luminescence appeared ahead. Another grill. I shoved against it, and with blessed relief it yielded, swinging outward. We tumbled out, gasping, onto a narrow metal catwalk suspended high above the factory floor. And there, barely 20 feet away, hung a skeletal fire escape ladder descending towards the blessed ground outside. "We did it," Finn breathed, a broken smile cracking the grime on his face. The relief was a fleeting phantom, for in that instant a sound echoed through the cavernous space that turned our blood to ice. Laughter. Not human laughter, but something cold, cruel, and utterly devoid of mirth, resonating from every shadowed corner. Then, stepping from the darkness onto the catwalk before us, a figure emerged. It was impossibly tall, its limbs elongated, joints bending at unnatural angles. Its face remained shrouded in shadow, yet I felt its attention lock onto us, a palpable weight. Did you truly believe escape was so simple? The voice scraped like rusted metal, setting every nerve on edge. The game has barely commenced. With a languid gesture of one impossibly long arm, the fire escape groaned, twisted, and then tore away from the wall, plummeting into the darkness below with a deafening crash. Stranded. We huddled together, transfixed by sheer terror, as more figures began to coalesce from the surrounding gloom. They materialized on the catwalk, silent and menacing, surrounding us, their eyes gleaming with a chilling, predatory delight. What do you want?" The words were ragged, torn from my throat. The towering figure leaned closer, its shadowed visage tilting. For a horrifying second, I saw what lay beneath the shadow, not features, but a smooth, undifferentiated expanse of pale skin. "Want?" It rasped, the sound thick with grotesque amusement. "We want to play, and you, my dears, you are the game." As the grotesque assembly closed in, the horrifying realization struck with absolute clarity. Our nightmare hadn't ended with our escape into the vents. It was only now truly beginning. Trapped high above the factory floor, surrounded by inhuman horrors, Leo's earlier careless words echoed with brutal irony. What could go wrong? Oh, the naivety, the blind foolishness. Gallows Mill, our ill-chosen playground, had indeed become our prison, and as the faceless things descended, I knew with chilling certainty it was destined to become our tomb. The shriek that tore through the twilight wasn't born of human lungs. It was a sound scraped raw from the throat of anguish itself, a resonant agony that iced the marrow in my bones and brought my pulse to a stuttering halt. Rooted to the spot in my neighbor's vestibule, the house key a cold, alien weight in my suddenly damp palm, I knew. I had blundered into something woven from shadow and ill intent, something far beyond the placid geometry of suburban lawns. It began, as such descents often do, with a gesture of simple kindness. Mrs. Gable, the silver-haired widow whose cottage stood sentinel beside my own patch of green, needed a caretaker for her home while she journeyed to her daughter's for the week. A favor readily granted. For 3 years, her presence had been a gentle constant, punctuated by offerings of still-warm ginger snaps and solicitous inquiries about my neglected flower beds. The initial days unfolded in quiet rhythm. Morning visits before the city claimed me, feeding her marmalade cat, Jasper. Evening returns to check the locks and share a companionable silence with the feline shadow. Mrs. Gable's house was a time capsule of chintz and floral patterns, fragrant with dried lavender, precisely the sort of haven one anticipates from a woman of her years and gentle demeanor. The fourth evening shattered the calm. Dinner concluded at my own table, I ambled across the intervening grass as dusk bled purple into the sky, painting elongated specters from familiar trees. Approaching Mrs. Gable's tidy bungalow, a detail snagged my attention. The heavy damask curtains of the front parlor, usually drawn back to welcome the fading light, were tightly closed. A minor anomaly, perhaps Jasper's mischief, I reasoned, dismissing the faint prickle of unease. I turned the key, the lock yielding with a soft click, and stepped into the threshold's gloom. "Jasper," I called, the name swallowed by the unnerving stillness. "Kitty, where are you?" Silence answered, thick and absolute. Ordinarily, Jasper materialized with a demanding chirp, weaving figure eights around my ankles. Tonight, nothing stirred. A cold knot tightened low in my belly as I ventured deeper. The living room lay shrouded in premature night. My fingers found the switch, flooding the space with harsh, revealing light. I choked back a gasp. The room, usually a testament to meticulous order, was violently disturbed. Gilt frames lay askew, their glass faces spider-webbed. Porcelain shards from a shattered rose vase glittered across the carpet, and scored deep into the plush fabric of a wingback chair were rents far too savage for any cat's claws. My heart hammered against my ribs. A break-in? Yet nothing obvious was pilfered. The television remained. Mrs. Gable's cherished silver service gleamed untouched on the sideboard. My mobile felt heavy in my hand, thumb hovering over the emergency number, when a sound reached me. A faint, rhythmic scraping from behind the basement door. "Jasper?" My voice quavered, betraying my rising fear. "Is that you down there?" The scratching ceased instantly. In its place arose a low, guttural rumble, a vibration felt in the teeth, resonant with a menace that lifted the fine hairs along my arms. Definitely not Jasper. Prudence screamed retreat. Flee, call for help, abandon this suddenly hostile space. But a fatal blend of curiosity and concern for the missing cat chained me there. Tremulously, I crept towards the basement door, the growl intensifying with each step, swelling into a resonant snarl. My hand, slick with sweat, hovered over the tarnished brass knob. A shaky intake of breath, and I turned it. The door didn't merely open. It exploded inward with a force that sent me staggering back. My skull connected sharply with the polished floorboards, stars bursting behind my eyes. Through a swimming haze, I registered movement. Something hulking, dark, hauling itself from the subterranean depths. It moved with a disjointed, loping gait that defied natural mechanics, more beast than man, yet disturbingly neither. As my vision sharpened, details coalesced into nightmare. Scabrous, matted fur, limbs articulated wrongly, bending at impossible angles, and eyes, 2 points of baleful yellow phosphorescence burning in the dimness. It resembled nothing catalogued by biology, a hellish synthesis of wolf and bear sculpted by a fever dream. I scrabbled backward on instinct, a frantic crab walk across the floor, my heart a frantic drum threatening to shatter my sternum. The entity advanced, unhurried, saliva glinting on jaws disproportionately vast for its skull. Those luminous eyes fixed upon me, imbued with a terrifying, predatory focus. And then came the shriek I'd first heard outside. That soul-flaying, inhuman cry that seemed to resonate within my very bones. It ripped from the creature as its maws stretched impossibly wide, loosing the sound upon the violated quiet of the house. Terror lent me wings. In that fractured moment of its monstrous vocalization, I found my feet and ran. Faster than I knew possible, faster than conscious thought. Behind me, the scrape and click of claws on hardwood spurred me onward. The front door seemed miles away. My fingers, numb and clumsy, wrestled with the deadbolt. Just as I sensed its hot, fetid breath stir the hair on my neck, the lock gave. I pitched forward into the cool night air, slamming the heavy oak door shut behind me. A sickening thud vibrated through the wood as the creature impacted it. I didn't pause, didn't look back, sprinting across the lawn to my own door, fumbling again with the key, finally collapsing against the inside panel, lungs burning, body trembling uncontrollably. My mind struggled to reconcile the impossible. Such things didn't exist. They belonged to folklore, to the flickering terrors of the cinema screen. Yet the image, those sulphur eyes, the gaping maw, was seared onto my retinas. With fingers that shook violently, I dialed the police, stammering out a garbled account that must have sounded utterly deranged. They listened with professional skepticism, but promised a patrol car. Waiting by the window, peering through the blinds, a dreadful thought pierced the fog of panic. Mrs. Gable. What if she returned unexpectedly? What if that thing was still prowling within her walls? I had to warn her. Her number, thankfully stored, connected after an eternity of rings. Her familiar, cheerful hello felt like an anchor in churning chaos. Mrs. Gable, I managed, my voice thin and reedy. Are you still with your daughter? Why, yes, dear, she replied. Is everything quite all right? You sound rather distressed. A pause stretched, thick with unspoken horror. How to articulate the unthinkable. There's something in your house. Something not right. Dangerous. Please, don't come back yet. The police are coming. The silence on the line deepened, became charged. When Mrs. Gable spoke again, all the cozy warmth had bled from her voice, leaving it chillingly flat. Oh dear, she murmured, devoid of inflection. You weren't meant to discover him like this. Ice water cascaded down my spine. Discover who? What do you mean? That presence you encountered, that's my Silas, my son. He has particular needs. I was certain I'd secured the basement properly before leaving. Nausea roiled within me. Your son? Mrs. Gable, that thing? It wasn't human. A sigh, heavy and weary, traveled down the line. No, I suppose he isn't. Not entirely. There was an incident, you understand, many years ago. Silas developed certain esoteric interests. An experiment went awry. Terribly awry. My reality tilted. This gentle old woman, her lavender sachets, her monstrous secret. But, keeping him locked away, why not seek help? A short, brittle laugh echoed faintly. What help exists for what Silas has become? No, containment was the only recourse. I've managed, but age makes it burdensome. That's why I asked for your assistance, dear. I hoped, perhaps in time. The unspoken implication struck with physical force. The house sitting, the extended visits, a test, an audition. She had been slowly, carefully grooming me to become the next keeper of her monstrous progeny. Before the horror could fully coalesce into words, distant sirens sliced through the night. They're here, I whispered, hand tightening on the phone. The police. No. Mrs. Gable's voice sharpened into panicked command. Don't let them find him. They won't understand. You must protect Silas, please. I ended the call, the phone slipping from my grasp. Flashing blue and red lights strobed across my living room walls. Outside, cruisers angled towards Mrs. Gable's darkened cottage. Officers emerged, weapons drawn, moving with cautious, tactical precision. A tense quiet descended, broken only by the crackle of police radios. Then it came again, that harrowing, otherworldly scream splitting the night. Shouts erupted, the sharp crack of gunfire, followed by more screams frantic and guttural. I sank to my knees, hands clamped over my ears. A useless defense against the sonic tapestry of violence unfolding next door. My quiet, predictable street had become a charnel house. Eventually, the cacophony subsided into an exhausted silence punctuated by official murmurs. Peeking through the curtains revealed a scene cordoned off by yellow tape. Ambulances idled, their interiors briefly illuminated as attendants loaded shrouded forms. A detective, face etched with grim fatigue, eventually arrived at my door. I recounted everything. The favor for Mrs. Gable, the unsettling discovery, the creature from the basement, the chilling phone call. He listened intently, his pen scratching across a notepad. "You're damn lucky," he stated flatly when I finished. "We lost 3 officers in there. Whatever that thing was, incredibly powerful, vicious. Did you stop it?" The question felt thick, dangerous on my tongue. His expression darkened further. Unclear. Scene's a mess. Significant blood loss, not all accounted for. No body recovered matching your description. Possibility it escaped, maybe into the woods bordering the properties. Search teams are out. Sleep refused me that night, and for many nights after. My thoughts circled endlessly around Silas. What existence had that been, entombed below ground? What maternal calculus allows such a thing, regardless of the transformation? And my own near miss. How close had I skirted the edge of that abyss, poised to inherit a nightmare dressed as neighborly duty? The ensuing weeks were a disorienting vortex of police interviews, unwanted media attention, and the persistent dread that sleep offered no escape from. Mrs. Gable, upon her return, was apprehended, facing charges that scarcely encompassed the horror she had contained and concealed. Through it all, She maintained she had only sought to shield her son. Silas himself remained spectral, vanished. Sometimes, when the wind sighs through the trees bordering the backyards, I fancy I hear a distant, desolate howling. On those nights, the deadbolts are checked, the curtains drawn tight. The veneer of suburban tranquility has been irrevocably stripped away. Behind the mundane facades, beneath the manicured lawns, what other secrets fester? What monsters, born of flesh or circumstance, wait patiently behind ordinary doors? One truth remains indelible. I will never house sit again. The night fractured, a violent percussion of breaking glass echoing from the floor below. My heart seized, a frantic bird trapped against my ribs. For one suspended breath, I clung to the flimsy hope of nightmare. Then, the undeniable sound. A slow, measured tread on the lower stairs, the groan of old wood under unwelcome weight. He had found me. After all the careful erasing, the miles put between us, Liam had unearthed my sanctuary. I untangled myself from the sheets, a ghost gliding over the chilled floorboards, my bare feet making no sound. Tremors ran through my hands as they closed around the polished ashwood of the baseball bat, now a grim bedside companion. The bitter irony stung. This quiet haven, chosen for its promise of peace, of a life rebuilt, now felt suffocatingly small, a cage of my own making. Descending the stairs was a journey through shadows and dread, each creaking step amplifying the frantic pulse in my ears. Moonlight slanted through the window blinds, striping the walls with bars of pale light, casting familiar furniture into monstrous shapes that seemed to writhe and reach. My grip tightened on the bat, my palm slick. At the landing, I froze, straining to hear past my own ragged breathing. Silence pressed in, thick and expectant, yet the very air vibrated with a hostile presence. I wasn't alone. My eyes swept the living room, cataloging the known, searching for the alien intrusion. A floorboard sighed directly behind me. I spun, swinging the bat in a blind, desperate arc. It connected, a solid thwack followed by a low grunt of pain. A figure lurched back in the dimness, clutching an arm. "Eliza?" The voice, a gravelly echo of past torments, sent ice down my spine. "Did you truly imagine you could vanish?" Liam materialized from the gloom, stepping into a shaft of invading moonlight. Broad, solid, the same chilling azure eyes capable of shifting from seduction to savagery in a heartbeat. His lips curled, a grotesque parody of amusement twisting his familiar features. "Leave," I managed, my voice a thin thread, yet surprisingly level. "Now, or I call the police." His laugh, once a sound that had made my pulse quicken with affection, now curdled in the air, thick with menace. "Feel free. We'll be long gone before they navigate these sleepy streets. It's time to come home, Eliza." I retreated, keeping the bat defensively positioned between us. "This is my home. You have no right." His eyes narrowed, the mockery evaporating, leaving only cold resolve. "You forfeited your right to decide. You're mine. Wasn't that the vow? Till death." He lunged, a sudden explosion of movement, snatching at the bat. Instinctively, I yanked back, but his fingers closed over the wood. We wrestled, a grotesque dance around the splintered wood, the bat a fulcrum of our shared, violent history. The stale reek of alcohol clung to him, sharp and familiar, igniting memories of the wildness in his eyes that always heralded the storm. A surge of pure, unadulterated desperation lent my limbs an unnatural power. I wrenched the bat free and swung again, the impact glancing off his shoulder. He staggered, a roar tearing from his throat, a blend of agony and fury. I didn't hesitate. Turning, I fled towards the kitchen, towards the back door, the promise of escape. My mind raced. Neighbors, safety, freedom. A hand clamped around my ankle like a manacle, yanking me brutally off balance. I crashed to the floor, the bat skittering away across the linoleum. He dragged me back, flipping me onto my back with terrifying ease. His face, a mask of incandescent rage, loomed above me as he straddled my hips, pinning my arms. "That was foolish," he snarled, his breath hot on my face. Running away, I could almost forgive, but fighting back, now you've made me truly angry. I bucked and twisted beneath his weight, a useless struggle against his superior strength. Ghosts of countless other nights flickered behind my eyes, the helplessness, the suffocating fear, the learned submission. But this wasn't the old house, insulated by indifference and averted gazes. This ground was mine. This nascent life was mine. Refusal, stark and potent, surged through me. His fist drew back. I twisted my head violently aside. His knuckles impacted the unyielding floor with a sickening crack. He bellowed, a raw sound of shock and pain. In that instant, his grip slackened. I drove my knee upward, hard, finding its mark. He gasped, doubling over, rolling off me. I scrambled away, regaining my feet, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my bruised ribs. Back in the living room, my desperate eyes scanned for anything, any advantage. They landed on the heavy crystal prism adorning the mantelpiece, a housewarming gesture from neighbors innocently offered. My fingers closed around its cool facets just as Liam filled the doorway, his face a canvas of pure, murderous intent. "You," the word hissed, venomous. "You'll pay for that." He launched himself forward. This time, anticipation guided my terror. I swung the vase, a desperate arc fueled by everything I refused to lose. It met his face with a sickening thud, a sound that fractured the air itself. Crystal exploded outwards as he collapsed, a dead weight hitting the floorboards. He lay utterly still, a dark stain blooming beneath his head. Silence rushed back in, broken only by my own ragged gasps. I stood frozen, waiting for movement, for another attack, but Liam remained inert. Nausea churned in my stomach. I stumbled backward, my legs connecting with the sofa, and sank onto the cushions, my entire frame shuddering uncontrollably. What had I done? Was he? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. Forcing leaden limbs to obey, I crept towards him, knelt beside the prone figure. His chest rose and fell, shallowly but undeniably. Alive, unconscious. Relief washed over me, potent and dizzying, immediately chased by renewed fear. He wouldn't stay down. Time was critical. Shaking hands, fumble with my phone, dialing the 3 numbers that felt like a lifeline. Waiting for the connection, my gaze remained locked on Liam, poised to bolt at the slightest twitch. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's calm, professional tone nearly shattered my composure. Help, I choked out, the word cracking. My ex-husband. He broke in, attacked me. I think I knocked him out. Please send someone, quickly. I don't know what he'll do when he wakes. I relayed the address, stumbling over the words, answering questions automatically while maintaining my vigil over Liam's still form. Assurance came. Help was en route. Stay safe if possible. But immobility gripped me. What if he stirred, vanished before they arrived? Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. Then, faintly at first, the approaching wail of sirens growing steadily louder, closer. Liam groaned, a low rumble in his chest. He shifted. Panic surged anew. I backed away, frantically searching for another makeshift weapon. But before he could regain full awareness, the room pulsed with flashing red and blue light pouring through the windows. Car doors slammed outside. Heavy footsteps pounded on my porch. Relief, sharp and overwhelming, brought tears to my eyes as a firm knock sounded. Police, anyone inside? I scrambled to the door, wrenching it open. 2 officers stood framed in the doorway, hands hovering near their holstered weapons, their expressions hardening as they took in my state. Torn clothing, wild eyes. Are you all right, ma'am? One asked, his voice steady. Where is he? I pointed numbly towards the living room. There. He's waking up. They moved past me swiftly, professionally, securing Liam before he could fully orient himself. As one officer applied handcuffs, the other turned back to me. Are you injured? Require paramedics? I shook my head, though a dull ache was beginning to bloom across my body where I'd hit the floor. Just shaken. More uniforms arrived, paramedics too. The following hours dissolved into a disorienting sequence of questions, observations, formal statements. I watched, detached, as they loaded Liam, face swollen and bruised, into the back of a patrol car. For a fleeting second, as they guided him in, our eyes met across the distance. His gaze held nothing but raw, undiluted hatred. A chilling promise lingered in the air. This wasn't finished. Dawn was painting the sky in bruised shades of pink and orange when I found myself on the porch steps, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, a mug of forgotten coffee cold in my hands. An officer, Davies, I thought his name was, sat nearby. We'll maintain a presence in the vicinity for the next few days, he was saying, and I strongly advise pursuing a permanent restraining order immediately. I nodded, feeling hollowed out. What happens to him now? Breaking and entering, assault, violation of the previous temporary order. Considering his history and the nature of this incident, he's facing substantial time. The words should have been comforting, but all I felt was an immense, soul-deep weariness. He'll get out eventually, I stated, the question implicit, Davies hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Eventually, yes. But you have time now. Time to fortify, to strategize. You're not alone in this, Miss Vance. There are networks, shelters. I know. I interrupted, the edge in my voice surprising even myself. A deeper breath. Forgive me. It's just, I thought I'd done everything meticulously. The move, the new identity, the quiet life. He still breached it all. He was quiet for a beat, considering. You did everything right, he said, his tone gentle but firm. You endured. You retaliated. That carries immense weight. My gaze drifted past him to the awakening street. A distant bark, a runner's cheerful wave, oblivious fragments of normalcy. I won't run again, the words emerged, solid, anchoring me. This is my place. He doesn't get to steal this too. Officer Davies nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Good. Stand your ground. Just remember, you don't need to stand entirely alone. Accept the support offered. Stay aware, but don't let the fear dictate your existence. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the world in defiant gold, something shifted within my chest. Not hope, not yet, but resilience. A quiet, fierce determination to reclaim the pieces of my life, my safety, my stolen peace. Liam had found me once. The possibility remained that he might try again. But I was no longer the same woman. I had survived. I had fought. And I would continue to fight, continue to survive, for however long it took. This house, this fragile new beginning, it belonged to me. And I would defend it. My fingers trembled, a frantic dance against the phone's smooth surface as I keyed in the emergency number. Yet, the voice on the other end, clipped and professional, merely echoed the hollow truth I already grasped. Phantom footfalls, whispers in the auditory dark without corporeal proof, were beyond their jurisdiction. But I race ahead. Allow me to unwind the thread to its beginning. It commenced 3 weeks prior, when Leo dangled a set of keys before me during our customary Friday lunch. His proposition: oversee his newly acquired residence while business called him away. A simple matter, he'd assured, the keys glinting under the cafe lights. Retrieve the post, tend to the greenery. It's in Willow Creek Estates, that fresh development flanking Route 16. Feel free. Home cinema, the contents of my fridge. Make yourself comfortable. Questions should have bloomed then. Why Leo, perpetually self-sufficient, suddenly required a custodian for his home and for an entire month? Such inquiries remained unvoiced. Instead, I envisioned an escape from my own constricted apartment, a temporary immersion in suburban opulence. The initial days unfolded serenely, bordering on blissful. Leo's house, a sprawling 3-bedroom ranch, hummed with the quiet efficiency of modern smart home technology. Willow Creek Estates itself was a monument to conformity. Rows of houses clad in identical beige siding, punctuated by stark black shutters, each boasting a 2-car garage. Inside, however, polished hardwood floors gleamed, granite countertops offered cool surfaces, and the 85-inch television Leo perpetually lauded dominated the living space. A rhythm established itself. Remote work fueled by Leo's high-speed internet, evenings punctuated by delivered meals or culinary experiments in his gourmet kitchen, followed by sprawling sessions on the leather sectional, absorbing the latest streaming obsession. The silence was a novel entity, thick and encompassing, devoid of urban clamor or the percussive routines of overhead neighbors. Only the low thrum of the central air conditioner broke the stillness. I adapted. Then arrived the night of Tuesday, October 12th. The date remains etched, tethered to the season finale of a wildly popular horror anthology I'd just consumed. Midnight struck, the phone screen confirmed it, precisely as the sound manifested. Footsteps emanating from the hallway just beyond the master bedroom door. Not the groan of timbers settling, nor the thermal sighs of plumbing. Unmistakably footsteps. Heel striking floor, then toe, a slow, deliberate cadence amplified by the resonant hard wood. My body became stone. Supine in bed, eyes fixed on the closed door, I listened. Thud, drag, thud, drag. Advancing, halting directly outside. Breath caught in my throat, a frantic bird against the cage of my ribs. 10 seconds stretched into 20, then 30. Silence reigned once more. Phone clutched tight, its flashlight beam slicing the dark. I wrenched the door open. The corridor lay vacant, bathed in the phone's cold glare. A meticulous search followed. Every room, every closet explored, lights blazing defiantly against the gloom. The front door stood secure, deadbolt thrown. The back door, likewise, windows fastened. No breach, no plausible point of ingress. Sleep became an impossibility that night. I remained upright in bed, a sentinel under the glare of artificial light, gaze oscillating between the impassive bedroom door and the security system's app on my phone. The exterior cameras registered nothing beyond the wind-stirred leaves. Morning found me by the coffee maker when the rumble of refuse bins being retracted from the curb reached my ears. Eager for the solace of daylight human interaction, I stepped outside. There stood Arthur, Leo's adjacent neighbor. "You'll be Leo's friend, then," he offered, maneuvering his bin up the incline of his driveway. "Settling in all right?" "It's pleasant," I managed, striving for nonchalance. Remarkably quiet area. A subtle shift occurred in Arthur's expression. Mostly quiet, yes. A pause, freighted with reluctance. "Listen, I don't mean to unsettle you, but did Leo happen to mention anything about the folks who lived here before him? Why they moved on?" A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "No, what was the story?" Didn't linger long. Decent couple, the Daltons, took possession when the development first opened last year, but they began reporting disturbances at night. Footsteps, specifically. The husband would scour the house for hours, never finding a source. 3 months they lasted before listing it again. And before them? Arthur shook his head slowly. The Daltons were the first occupants of this house. Though the construction crews circulated some peculiar tales back then. Likely just spinning yarns to spook each other, you understand. The urge to confide, to spill the events of the previous night, rose and subsided. Voiced in the clear light of day, it sounded like delusion. I offered a simple nod and retreated indoors. That evening, I armed myself. My phone, positioned to record video, aimed down the length of the hallway. A fine line of baby powder, gleaned from some forgotten ghost-hunting film, dusted the threshold. A foolish gesture, perhaps, yet born of a desperate need for validation or refutation. The footsteps returned, punctual as a phantom clock striking midnight. The identical rhythm, measured, deliberate steps progressing down the corridor. I compelled myself to remain motionless, every nerve fiber shrieking for flight. Again, they ceased just outside the door. This time, I counted a full minute before investigating. The hallway stretched empty. The powder lay smooth, untouched. My phone's recording showed nothing but vacant space. Yet, the sound had been undeniable. This spectral pattern held for 5 consecutive nights. Always midnight, always the same unhurried tread, always yielding nothing tangible upon inspection. My sleep schedule inverted. Days became interludes for rest. Nights became vigils spent migrating from room to room, hoping to ambush the source of the disturbance. The 6th night brought deviation. Stationed in the living room, feigning absorption in the television while truly anticipating the midnight hour, the sound began, but originating from the kitchen. I muted the TV. In the abrupt hush, the steps resonated louder, closer. Rising cautiously, phone flashlight carving a path through the dimness, I tracked their progress. From the kitchen into the dining room, crossing the house, heading unequivocally towards me. I pressed back against the wall, my unoccupied hand fumbling blindly for the light switch. The footsteps entered the living room. My flashlight beam illuminated only empty air where the sound originated. Thud, drag, thud, drag. They halted perhaps 3 feet before me. My fingers found the switch. Light flooded the space, banishing shadows. Nothing. Only Leo's meticulously arranged living room, precisely as it had stood moments before. I called Leo that night, my voice betraying its tremor as I recounted the escalating phenomena. A protracted silence stretched across the line after I finished. I should have been up front, he conceded finally, his tone heavy. I convinced myself. Maybe the Daltons fabricated the story, leveraged to escape their mortgage. Or perhaps a rational cause existed. Faulty pipes, the house settling, something mundane. You were aware of this? The realtor's disclosure mentioned it. 3 families occupied the original farmhouse on this land, before the Daltons, before the subdivision. Each reported identical occurrences. Footsteps at midnight. Each departed within months. The developers acquired the land cheaply due to its reputation, razed the old structure, erected this entire neighborhood. The price I got reflected that history. I assumed it was all. Have you heard them, Leo? Another pause, longer this time. Once. The night before, I asked you to house sit. That's the real reason I left. Fabricated the urgency of this business trip. Truth is, I couldn't bear another night here alone. Logic dictated I pack immediately, secure a hotel room, retreat to the familiar confines of my apartment. Yet, an obstinate force anchored me there. Stubbornness, perhaps, or a morbid curiosity, a compulsion to confront this invisible tormentor, or maybe, simply, the inability to admit defeat, to flee from something I couldn't even perceive. In the ensuing nights, the footsteps grew audacious. They might commence in disparate corners of the house, but invariably homed in on my location, sometimes halting unnervingly close beside me, other times pacing unseen circles around my position. On one occasion, they shadowed me relentlessly from room to room for an entire hour. I deployed every countermeasure conceivable: lines of salt across thresholds, religious icons, burning sage, sophisticated motion detectors. Nothing deterred them. Nothing made a discernible difference. Last night shattered my resolve. I stood in the kitchen crafting a late-night sandwich, a deliberate effort to remain awake through the turning of the hour. The footsteps commenced prematurely, 11:45 p.m. But this time, they were not solitary. A door creaked open upstairs, then another and another. Multiple sets of footsteps now traversed the house, descending the staircase, fanning out across the ground floor. The knife slipped from my grasp, its clatter sharp against the countertop as the sounds converged upon the kitchen. They surrounded me. I could hear them pressing in from all sides, dozens of invisible feet treading Leo's expensive hardwood floors. That was the moment I dialed 911. The dispatcher, though maintaining professionalism, radiated skepticism. An officer could perform a perimeter check, she offered, but the response time would be at least half an hour. I disconnected the call. The footsteps drew nearer still, their invisible cordon tightening around me. The kitchen's temperature plummeted. My own breath plumed visibly in the air. A crushing weight settled on my chest, an unseen compression from all directions. I bolted, running blindly through, the locus of the sound, encountering pockets of intense cold as I burst past them, out the front door and into the sanctuary of my car. I drove until I found the fluorescent refuge of a 24-hour diner, and I have not looked back. This morning, I informed Leo I could endure no more. He expressed understanding, murmuring plans to contact a real estate agent upon his return. "And the next residence?" I queried, the words tasting like ash. "Full disclosure," he affirmed wearily, "but someone will purchase it. Someone always does. They'll dismiss the history, believe themselves capable of managing it, just as we did. And the footsteps, they'll persist, walking every night at midnight, searching for something or someone." I composed this from my apartment. Midnight approaches. The familiar thumps and scrapes emanate from my upstairs neighbors. Sounds I once cursed, now embraced with profound gratitude. At least these footsteps possess visible agents. Research into the Willow Creek Estates area unearthed fragments of its past. Before the farmland, before the developers, it was a convergence point, a crossroads where three ancient trails intersected. Local lore speaks of travelers pausing there overnight on westward journeys. Some, the stories whisper, never resumed their travels. Perhaps that is the nature of the search, night after night. Disembodied feet seeking a path long since buried beneath asphalt and manicured lawns. Or perhaps they seek something else entirely, something lost or stolen or concealed deep within that ground. I cannot know. I know only this. Somewhere in Willow Creek Estates, within a beautiful new house adorned with hardwood floors and granite countertops, footsteps echo through vacant halls, and soon, very soon, another soul will hear them. They always do,